In a small town, 85-year-old Rose Thompson quietly shops at the grocery store she founded decades ago. No one recognizes her. She's just another elderly black woman to them. When the new manager, Bradley Carson, publicly humiliates and bans her for suspicious behavior, he has no idea who she really is. Instead of immediately revealing her identity, Rose and her grandson Marcus methodically gather evidence, building a case that exposes not just one racist manager, but a pattern of discrimination across multiple stores. As Bradley implements policies to drive away elderly black customers, Rose patiently documents everything, gathering community support and preparing for the perfect moment to reveal her true identity. At the company board meeting, Bradley confidently presents his improved metrics, unaware that Rose Thompson, founder and owner of the entire Thompson Markets chain, is about to walk through the door. What would you do if you were Rose? Would you fire Bradley immediately or transform this into an opportunity for lasting change? Like, comment, and subscribe to see how justice is served in ways you never expected. Rose Thompson moved with careful precision as dawn broke over the city. At 85 years old, her movements were deliberate but efficient, a lifetime habit formed during decades of building Thompson Markets from a single corner store into a regional grocery empire. 6:45 a.m., Rose murmured, checking her watch. She preferred early shopping hours when the store was quiet. Smoothing the collar of her modest blue dress, she pinned a simple brooch at her throat, a gold T with a small diamond at its center, the original logo she designed 50 years ago. The kitchen of her modest bungalow was immaculate. Though she could afford luxury, Rose maintained the same humble home she'd purchased when the first store began turning a profit. Her children had long urged her to move to something grander, but Rose saw no reason for extravagance. The neighborhood had changed around her, gentrified, as they called it, but it remained home. Rose packed her shopping list and canvas bags into her weathered leather purse. Weekly shopping trip to Thompson Markets wasn't just about groceries, it was about quality control. When she handed leadership to her son William a decade ago, she had one condition: she would remain an anonymous customer, visiting different locations to ensure their founding principles remained intact. Standard slip when nobody's watching, she often said. The bus arrived at 7 a.m. sharp. The driver, Marcus, smiled broadly. "Morning, Miss Rose, beautiful day ahead." "Indeed it is, Marcus." "How's that grandson of yours doing in college?" "Just made Dean's List, Miss Rose, first in our family." "Wonderful news," she replied, carefully navigating the steps. "Education was always the key to my success, too." Rose settled into her usual seat, window side, third row from the front. The familiar route to the Westside Thompson Markets location took 20 minutes. She'd visited this particular store 3 months ago, long enough that staff turnover meant she wouldn't be recognized. As the city awakened around her, Rose's mind drifted to the early days, when banks wouldn't lend to a black woman entrepreneur in 1972, when suppliers demanded payment up front while extending credit to white-owned businesses, when customers crossed the street rather than patronize her store. How she'd persevered, focusing on fresh produce and community needs overlooked by larger chains. Now Thompson Markets had 36 locations across 3 states. The bus arrived at 7:22 a.m. Rose thanked Marcus and made her way toward the gleaming storefront. The familiar red and gold signage brought a small, private smile to her face. She noticed changes immediately. The community bulletin board that had been a fixture for decades was gone. The elderly greeter who'd worked there for 15 years was replaced by a security guard with a stern expression. Inside, the layout had been modified, with less space for local vendors and more for nationally branded items. Rose frowned slightly. This wasn't the Thompson Market's philosophy of community engagement she'd established. She collected a small basket, unfolding her carefully written shopping list. Starting in produce as always, she examined the selection with a practiced eye. The quality was acceptable, though not exceptional. The prices, however, had increased significantly on items commonly purchased by the surrounding predominantly black neighborhood. "Changes indeed," she murmured, making mental notes. Rose continued through each aisle methodically, occasionally placing items in her basket. She paused to help an elderly man reach a can from a high shelf and directed a confused young mother to the baby formula. In the coffee aisle, she met Geraldine Wilson, a contemporary she recognized from community functions. They chatted briefly about the neighborhood church fundraiser. As they spoke, Rose noticed a store employee watching them intently from the end of the aisle. "The new manager's got his people keeping an eye on us older folks," Geraldine whispered. "Like we're all shoplifters or something. Been happening about 3 months now." Rose nodded thoughtfully. "That doesn't sound like Thompson Markets policy." "Well, ever since that Bradley Carson took over, things have changed. Just last week, he accused Mrs. Jenkins of stealing when her arthritis made her drop her purse, embarrassed her something terrible." As Geraldine departed, Rose continued her shopping with a heavier heart. This was precisely why she maintained these anonymous visits. Something was very wrong at this location, something contrary to everything Thompson Markets stood for. She completed her shopping at precisely 8:30 a.m. and headed to the checkout, unaware that her simple weekly ritual was about to become a confrontation that would shake the foundation of the company she'd built with her own hands. Bradley Carson surveyed the store floor from his elevated office, a renovation he'd insisted upon during his first month as manager. At 42, he considered himself a retail efficiency expert, having implemented loss prevention protocols at several chains before joining Thompson Markets. Productivity up 17%, shrinkage down, he muttered, reviewing his morning reports. Board will have to notice these numbers at quarterly review. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Carson, security has flagged a potential situation in checkout 3, his assistant reported. Bradley adjusted his tie and strode toward the front, clipboard in hand. He'd instituted a new profiling system that flagged high-risk customers, a policy he deliberately kept out of written documentation. At checkout 3, Rose was carefully placing her items on the conveyor belt when Bradley approached. The cashier, a young woman named Tanya, looked uncomfortable. "Is there a problem here?" Bradley demanded, looking directly at Tanya while pointedly ignoring Rose. "No, sir," Tanya replied. "I was just processing Mrs. Thompson's regular purchases." Bradley's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized Rose. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside for a moment." Rose looked up, surprised. "Is something wrong?" "Security protocol," Bradley stated flatly. "Please step away from the register and bring your purse." Several customers turned to watch. Rose felt her cheeks warm but maintained her composure as she followed Bradley to a small office near the front. "Empty your purse, please," Bradley instructed without offering her a seat. "Young man, I've been shopping here for years. What exactly are you suggesting?" Bradley's expression hardened. "Store policy. We've had increased theft in this location, particularly among certain demographics." Rose understood his implication immediately. With practiced dignity born from decades of similar encounters, she placed her purse on the desk and opened it. "Perhaps you'd like to check my shopping bags as well. Everything here has been scanned and paid for in previous visits." Bradley rifled through her belongings, finding only her shopping list, wallet, keys, and a small notebook. His frustration grew visible when he discovered nothing suspicious. "Canvas bags haven't been paid for," he declared, seizing on the reusable shopping bags she'd brought from home. "These are my personal bags that I've used for over a decade," Rose explained calmly. "Thompson Markets began encouraging reusable bags in 2010, I believe it was April." Bradley's eyes narrowed. "You seem to know a lot about company policies for a casual shopper." "I pay attention," Rose replied simply. A security guard appeared at the door with footage pulled from the store cameras. "Sir, I've reviewed the tape. She didn't take anything." Bradley waved him away. "Fine, you can go, ma'am, but I'll be watching you." Rose gathered her belongings with deliberate calm. "Thank you for your diligence, though it seems misplaced." As she turned to leave, Bradley blocked her path. "Actually, I've been meaning to address customers like you. This store is implementing a new membership program. Starting next week, only members can shop here." "Membership program?" Rose questioned. "That contradicts the Thompson Markets' founding principle of community accessibility." Bradley's expression shifted to open disdain. "Well, we're modernizing. The application fee is $200 with monthly dues." Rose recognized the tactic immediately, a transparent attempt to change the store's demographic by pricing out certain customers. That would be prohibitive for many families in this neighborhood. "That's the point," Bradley muttered, then caught himself. "I mean, that's progress. Upgrading our clientele." The security guard shifted uncomfortably at the door. "I see," Rose said quietly. "And does corporate headquarters know about this new initiative?" Bradley's face flushed. "Listen, I run this store my way. We've had too many of your type causing problems. I've been building a case file." He pulled out a folder labeled Incidents filled with reports. All documented shoplifting attempts from people who fit a certain profile. Rose glanced at the reports, immediately noting they contained no actual evidence, just suspicions targeting elderly black shoppers. "In fact," Bradley continued, gaining confidence, "I'm going to have to ask you not to return to this store. Consider yourself banned." He seemed to relish the words. "On what grounds?" Rose asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Manager's discretion. I don't need a reason." Bradley smirked. "I own this place now." Rose looked him directly in the eyes. "Young man, I think you misunderstand the concept of ownership. Security will escort you out," Bradley replied dismissively. "And don't bother complaining to corporate. Those emails come to me." As the security guard reluctantly led her toward the exit, Rose maintained perfect posture, ignoring the stares of curious shoppers. Outside, the guard murmured an apology. "It's not right what he's doing, ma'am. Been happening a lot lately." Rose nodded. "What's your name, young man?" "James Williams, ma'am." "Well, Mr. Williams, sometimes justice takes patience. Would you happen to have a card? I may need a reliable witness." James hesitated, then slipped her his contact information. He's been targeting older black folks especially. It's not what Thompson Markets used to stand for. No, Rose agreed softly. It certainly is not. She walked to the bus stop with measured steps, her mind already shifting from shock to strategic planning. In 50 years of business, she'd faced discrimination countless times. The difference now was that it was happening in her own store, bearing her own name. As the bus approached, Rose pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Marcus, it's Grandma. I need your legal expertise. Something troubling has happened at the West Side store." Marcus Thompson arrived at his grandmother's bungalow at 5:30 p.m., precisely 3 hours after her call. At 41, he'd built his reputation as one of the city's most respected civil rights attorneys, though few knew of his connection to the Thompson Markets legacy. "Grandma," he said, embracing Rose gently, "I came as soon as court adjourned." Rose had prepared tea and arranged relevant documents on her dining table, a habit from her executive days. The surface now displayed store policies, founding principles, and notes from the incident. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Rose said, pouring tea into fine china cups, one of her few indulgences. "The situation requires careful consideration." Marcus reviewed her handwritten account. "This is textbook discrimination. We could file immediate legal action." Rose raised her hand slightly, the subtle gesture that had silenced boardrooms for decades. "Before we pursue legal channels, we must gather comprehensive evidence. This isn't about one incident, it's about systemic issues." "Understood," Marcus nodded, pulling out his laptop. "Let's establish our objectives." Together, they developed a methodical response strategy on Rose's legal pad. 1. Documentation phase. Obtain security footage, James Williams contact. Secure written statements from witnesses. Access internal company records on recent policy changes. Document pattern of similar incidents. 2. Evidence collection. Interview other affected customers. Review customer complaint records. Analyze demographic data pre-post management chain. Evaluate store policy modifications against company charter. 3. Strategic options. Internal corporate resolution. Civil rights complaint. Media involvement contingency only. Legal action class action potential. 4. Desired outcomes. Policy restoration and compliance. Staff training implementation. Accountability measures. Community reconciliation. Systemic safeguards against recurrence. The key, Rose emphasized, is addressing the underlying system, not just punishing Bradley Carson. Individual punishment without structural change perpetuates the cycle. Marcus typed notes efficiently. "Dad doesn't know about this yet. William has excellent financial acumen but lacks direct operational experience with these issues. The quarterly board meeting is in 17 days. I prefer we present a complete assessment rather than partial information." Rose sipped her tea thoughtfully. "This represents exactly why I maintained my anonymous shopping program. Our success created distance from our founding principles." "How do you want to handle your identity?" Marcus asked. "Once revealed, it changes the dynamics considerably." Rose considered this carefully. "My identity is a strategic resource to be deployed at the optimal moment. For now, I'm simply a customer experiencing discrimination. That perspective must remain central." Marcus nodded, understanding her wisdom. "The legal framework here is strong, but the evidence must be unassailable." "Precisely," Rose agreed. "Additionally, we need information on Bradley's background. His comment about implementing similar programs elsewhere suggests a pattern." They worked methodically until 9 p.m., developing a comprehensive investigation framework. Marcus would access internal systems without alerting executive leadership, while Rose would connect with community members to identify additional incidents. "I've established a secure digital folder," Marcus explained, showing Rose his laptop screen. "All evidence will be cataloged here with timestamps and authentication markers." Rose approved with a nod. "Tomorrow, I'll contact Geraldine Wilson to begin community outreach." The church senior group meets on Thursdays, an efficient way to identify affected individuals. Before departing, Marcus paused at the door. "Grandma, are you sure you don't want to simply call William? He could terminate this manager immediately." Rose straightened her shoulders. "This isn't about one manager, Marcus. It's about ensuring our company truly serves all people with dignity. Quick termination addresses a symptom while ignoring the disease." "The Thompson way," Marcus smiled. "Strategic patience." "Indeed," Rose replied. "Justice isn't merely punishment, it's transformation. Now I need you to contact Mr. Williams discreetly about that security footage. Evidence degrades with time." After Marcus left, Rose sat at her kitchen table reviewing the company's original mission statement she'd written in 1972. The final line remained her guide. Communities thrive when businesses serve with respect, integrity, and equal consideration for all customers. She picked up her phone and dialed Geraldine's number. The work had just begun. Marcus began his systematic investigation at 8 a.m. the next morning. Sitting in his downtown office, he established a secure digital environment to document every finding with timestamp verification and chain of custody protocols. Investigation log, Westside Thompson Markets location. Day 18:03 a.m., he dictated into his recording device. His first priority was securing the security footage. James Williams had agreed to meet during his break at 11:30 a.m. in the park across from the store. Meanwhile, Marcus accessed Thompson Markets' internal systems using his limited authorized credentials as the company's occasional legal consultant. The digital trail revealed concerning patterns. Query results, Westside location. Customer complaints, plus 327% previous quarter comparison. Demographic shift, percent decline in senior customers. Policy modifications, 17 unauthorized deviations from corporate standards. Inventory adjustments, premium product increase plus 68%, basic necessities percent. Profit margin plus 11.2%, highest regional increase. Marcus documented each finding methodically. The data confirmed initial suspicions. The Westside location was systematically reorienting its customer base through policy changes not approved by corporate headquarters. At 11:25 a.m., Marcus arrived at the designated meeting point. James Williams appeared precisely on schedule, looking nervously over his shoulder. "I took a risk bringing this," James said, handing over a flash drive. "Mr. Carson monitors everything, but I cloned the footage from backup storage." "This will remain confidential," Marcus assured him. "Can you verify the chain of custody?" James nodded. "The footage is unaltered. Date and timestamp watermarks are embedded in the bottom right corner. I accessed it using my authorized security credentials." Back at his office, Marcus reviewed the footage meticulously. The video confirmed Rose's account entirely. Bradley's discriminatory behavior was clearly visible, as was his deliberate targeting of elderly black customers. Evidence log, entry 7, security footage obtained. Initial review confirms subject narrative with high fidelity. Note patterns of selective enforcement against demographics matching complainant profile. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had compiled sufficient preliminary evidence to establish a pattern of discrimination. His next phase required field investigation. He drove to the community center where Rose was conducting her own research. The senior center meeting room was filled with Thompson Markets customers sharing similar experiences. Rose had organized them efficiently, collecting signed statements and contact information. 17 documented incidents in the past month alone, Rose informed Marcus quietly as they compared notes, all following identical patterns. "The data supports the testimonials," Marcus confirmed. "I've located internal communications where Carson explicitly outlined plans to upgrade the clientele through selective enforcement and policy manipulation." One elderly man approached them hesitantly. "Are you the lawyers looking into that grocery store situation?" "We're conducting an investigation," Marcus confirmed. "Did you have an experience to share?" Harold Jenkins, former school principal, the man introduced himself. "Last month, Carson's people followed me throughout the store. When I complained, he banned me for creating a disturbance. Been shopping there 30 years. Rose nodded sympathetically. "Would you be willing to provide a formal statement, Mr. Jenkins?" "Already prepared it," Harold replied, handing over a neatly typed document. "Got 3 more seniors with me who had similar experiences. We've been documenting everything." Marcus was impressed by the thoroughness of the community response. "This will be extremely helpful." By 5 p.m., they had assembled 27 sworn statements, matched with security footage timestamps and internal policy documents. The evidence was substantial but still required additional correlation. Phase 2 complete, Marcus noted in his log. Proceeding to corporate record analysis. That evening, Rose and Marcus reconvened at her home to analyze their findings. "The evidence pattern is clear," Marcus explained, organizing documents across the dining table. "Carson implemented an unauthorized membership program specifically targeting this neighborhood demographic. The internal communications reveal explicit intent." Rose reviewed the spreadsheet Marcus had prepared. "These pricing adjustments systematically disadvantage specific customer segments. Basic necessities increased by 27% while luxury items decreased 15%. "Exactly," Marcus agreed, "and here's where it gets interesting. Carson has implemented similar programs at 3 previous employers, all resulting in demographic shifts within 6 months. How did he obtain employment with us?" Rose wondered. Our hiring protocols specifically screen for inclusivity values. Marcus pulled up Carson's personnel file. He provided falsified references and concealed termination from his previous position following discrimination complaints. Rose frowned. That indicates screening process vulnerabilities requiring immediate correction. Their methodical analysis continued past midnight, organizing evidence into categorical classifications. 1. Direct evidence. O. Video documentation, 17 incidents. O. Witness statements, 27 verified accounts. O. Written policy directives from Carson. O. Demographic shift data. 2. Indirect evidence. O. Price adjustment patterns. O. Inventory modifications. O. Staffing changes, diversity reduction. O. Customer service complaint patterns. 3. Contextual factors. O. Carson's employment history. O. Previous legal settlements. O. Pattern of targeted enforcement. O. Financial incentives for demographic change. Tomorrow, Rose decided as they concluded their session, we need to interview regional management. Someone authorized these changes explicitly or through neglect. Marcus nodded. I've scheduled a meeting with Regional Director Patricia Lawson at 10 a.m. She oversees Carson's location. Excellent, Rose approved. Remember, our objective remains systemic correction, not merely individual accountability. As Marcus gathered his materials, his phone chimed with an alert. Grandmother, there's been a development. Carson has apparently filed trespassing charges against you and submitted restraining orders against several seniors who have submitted complaints. Rose's expression remained calm, though her eyes flashed with determination. Document it. This escalation pattern is consistent with his previous employment situations. He's establishing a preemptive defense. I'll file counters immediately, Marcus assured her. No, Rose decided after brief consideration. Let the process proceed temporarily. It provides additional evidence of retaliatory behavior and establishes clear intent. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Strategic patience again? Precisely, Rose confirmed. The complete pattern must emerge before we respond comprehensively. Our time frame remains the board meeting, 17 days from now. As Marcus departed, Rose reviewed the files one final time. Bradley Carson's actions weren't merely discriminatory, they undermined everything Thompson Markets had stood for since its founding. The investigation had confirmed her suspicions. This wasn't an isolated incident, but a systematic attempt to transform her legacy. The evidence was mounting, the strategy was clear, and Rose Thompson was just getting started. Rose awoke at 5:30 a.m., reviewing her task list before beginning her day. The investigation was proceeding methodically, but community outreach remained equally crucial to their strategy. By 9 a.m., she had established her temporary command center at the Westside Community Center. Marcus had provided her with a secure laptop, encrypted communication channels, and a digital document management system to track all incoming testimonials. Evidence collection protocol activated, Rose noted in her log. Implementing community outreach phase, day 1. Her first priority was organizing affected customers into a cohesive documentation unit. Geraldine Wilson had proven invaluable, activating her extensive social network to identify potential witnesses. Rose had prepared standardized reporting templates to ensure consistent documentation. Incident reporting form. Date time. Customer name. Witness contact. Incident description. Supporting evidence. Pattern connection. By mid-morning, 17 seniors had arrived to document their experiences. Rose processed each case methodically, connecting patterns across incidents while maintaining a comprehensive evidence database. Mrs. Thompson, called Harold Jenkins, the retired school principal. Channel 7 News just arrived outside. Someone contacted them about our meeting. Rose frowned, checking her timeline. Media engagement wasn't scheduled until their evidence base was fully established. Immature exposure risks evidence integrity, she noted. Implementing contingency protocol B3. With practiced efficiency, Rose directed half the seniors to continue documentation while Geraldine led others to a secondary location. Harold volunteered to interface with the media, providing limited information without compromising their investigation. Focus on community impact, not case specifics, Rose instructed him. No individual names, no corporate connections yet. While Harold managed the media presence, Rose received an urgent call from Marcus. Grandmother, Carson is escalating. He's implemented immediate policy changes requiring customer verification, address proof and credit checks for all purchases over $50. Document transmission received, Rose confirmed as the policy details appeared on her secure email. This timing directly correlates with our investigation activities. The pattern indicates awareness of our efforts. Should we accelerate our timeline? Marcus asked. Negative, Rose decided after brief analysis. This escalation provides critical evidence of discriminatory intent. Continue documentation phase as scheduled. By noon, the investigation had drawn significant community attention. 3 additional Thompson Markets locations reported similar policy shifts, suggesting a regional pattern rather than isolated incidents. Rose reorganized her approach, implementing a hub-and-spoke documentation model. 1. Central Evidence Repository Rose. O. Standardized Documentation Protocols. O. Pattern Analysis Algorithms. O. Timeline Correlation Matrices. O. Authentication Verification. 2. Field Documentation Teams, Community Volunteers. O. On-site Incident Reporting. O. Witness Statement Collection. O. Policy Implementation Monitoring. O. Demographic Impact Assessment. 3. Legal Framework Development Marcus. O. Precedent Analysis. O. Regulatory Compliance Review. O. Remediation Structure Design. O. Accountability Mechanism Formulation. The community response exceeded their projections. By 3 p.m., 73 customers had provided detailed testimonials spanning 6 months of incidents. The evidence pattern revealed systematic discrimination targeting specific demographics. Mrs. Thompson, called Geraldine, interrupting Rose's documentation. Bradley Carson just arrived at the community center. He's demanding to speak with whoever is orchestrating this smear campaign. Rose remained composed. Implement security protocol. Active recording devices on all channels. Maintain evidence chain integrity. As Carson stormed into the meeting room, Rose activated her voice recorder discreetly. Who's responsible for this? He demanded, waving printed news articles. You're interfering with legitimate business operations. Rose stood, maintaining dignified composure. Mr. Carson, I presume I'm Rose Thompson, a customer you banned from your store last week. Carson's eyes narrowed. You're behind this. I've filed trespassing charges against you already. This meeting constitutes harassment of a business owner. Interesting terminology, Rose noted calmly. Business owner implies ownership, which you claimed during our previous interaction. Perhaps you'd clarify your actual position with Thompson Markets. I'm the authorized location manager, Carson snapped, which gives me full operational discretion. These policy changes are improving profitability by 23%. By systematically excluding specific customer demographics, Rose observed, our documentation indicates targeted enforcement based on age and racial characteristics. Carson's expression shifted from anger to calculation. Listen, old woman, you're interfering with corporate strategy. I have regional approval for these changes. You're fighting forces beyond your capacity. Perhaps, Rose acknowledged. Or perhaps you misunderstand the situation entirely. Realizing he'd revealed too much, Carson changed tactics. This meeting is over. Any further interference will result in additional legal action. As he departed, Rose made a notation. Subject confirmed regional approval claim. Cross-reference required with Patricia Lawson interview scheduled for tomorrow, 10 a.m. By evening, the community support had expanded significantly. Local news coverage had attracted attention from civil rights organizations, expanding their resource network. 3 city council members had contacted Marcus expressing concern about the situation's impact on their constituents. At 7 p.m., Rose and Marcus reconvened to assess their progress. Evidence collection phase is 74% complete, Rose reported. Pattern recognition algorithms show consistent discrimination targeting elderly Black customers with 97.3% correlation across incidents. Marcus updated his documentation. Regional Director Lawson canceled tomorrow's meeting, cited ongoing internal review as justification. Anticipated response, Rose noted. Implement executive escalation protocol. Contact board member Sandra Chen directly. Her oversight committee handles discrimination concerns. Board communication normally requires executive approval, Marcus reminded her. Rose smiled slightly. In this case, we utilize alternative channels. Sandra and I served on the Urban Development Commission together 15 years ago. As they finalized their day's documentation, Rose received an unexpected call from James Williams, the security guard. Mrs. Thompson, I've been terminated. Carson found out I provided security footage. He's replacing all security records and implementing new data retention policies, erasing evidence. Anticipated contingency, Rose assured him. Your position is protected. Documentation secured through redundant channels. Report to Marcus Thompson's office tomorrow at 9 a.m. for deposition and temporary employment arrangement. After completing the call, Rose updated their strategic timeline. Evidence destruction attempt confirms knowledge of vulnerability. We've reached phase transition requirements. Marcus nodded, understanding. Time to accelerate. Precisely, Rose confirmed. Implement board meeting protocol. Adjust timeline from 17 days to 72 hours. Corporate governance emergency provisions apply when evidence destruction is documented. As they concluded their session, a breaking news alert appeared on Rose's tablet. The local station was running a feature on discriminatory practices at beloved grocery chain, showing customers being turned away at multiple Thompson Markets locations. The narrative has expanded beyond our control parameters, Marcus observed with concern. Rose studied the footage carefully. Not beyond control, beyond containment. The system is revealing itself more rapidly than anticipated. Prepare board documentation package immediately. We implement the final phase in 3 days. As darkness fell, Rose completed her daily log entry. Day 1 community outreach completed. Evidence threshold exceeded. Corporate misconduct pattern confirmed. Proceeding to resolution phase with comprehensive documentation foundation established. The strategic response had evolved into a movement, and Rose Thompson was ready to reclaim her legacy. Thompson Markets headquarters occupied a modest 6-story building downtown. Despite the company's growth, Rose had always insisted on practical facilities rather than ostentatious displays of corporate success. The boardroom, however, reflected the company's values, spacious enough for community representatives to attend quarterly meetings, with walls displaying photos of store openings across 5 decades. At 9:15 a.m., Bradley Carson arrived for his scheduled presentation, confident in his performance metrics. The quarterly review represented his opportunity to showcase the improvements he'd implemented at Westside. He arranged his presentation materials methodically, unaware of the documentation package that had been distributed to board members 30 minutes earlier. William Thompson, Rose's son and current CEO, entered at 9:25 a.m. accompanied by the executive team. At 63, William had successfully expanded the company's regional presence while maintaining consistent profitability. His leadership style emphasized financial performance, sometimes at the expense of the community-centered approach Rose had pioneered. Good morning, everyone, William began at precisely 9:30 a.m. Before we start the standard agenda, I've been informed of an urgent governance matter requiring immediate attention. Bradley straightened in his chair, noticing that several board members were reviewing identical red folders he hadn't received. Sandra Chen, head of the Ethics Committee, addressed the room. We've received substantial documentation regarding policy violations at multiple store locations, most predominantly at Westside. The evidence package before you contains sworn testimonials, statistical analyses, and video documentation of systematic discriminatory practices. William's expression tightened. Bradley, it appears these allegations center around your management. Do you have any initial response? Bradley projected confidence. Sir, I've simply implemented efficiency protocols to improve profitability. The Westside location has shown a 23% increase under my leadership. By systematically excluding elderly black customers, Sandra noted, referencing specific page numbers in the documentation. The data indicates selective enforcement of invented policies specifically targeting demographic groups protected under both our corporate charter and federal law. Bradley maintained his composure. With respect, Ms. Chen, those customers represented lower profitability segments. My responsibility is maximizing shareholder value. The boardroom door opened quietly as Marcus Thompson entered, escorting Rose. Several board members recognized her immediately, while others looked confused at the interruption. William's expression shifted from confusion to shock. Mother, what are you doing here? I've requested speaker privileges for the public comment section, Rose stated calmly, taking a seat at the back of the room. That's her, Bradley exclaimed. That's the troublemaker who's organized this smear campaign. She's been banned from my store for disruptive behavior. William looked between his mother and Bradley, processing the situation. I believe we need clarity here. Mother, would you care to explain your involvement? Rose approached the podium with measured steps, placing her documentation binder precisely at the center. For those who don't know me, I am Rose Thompson. 50 years ago, I founded this company with a single store on Jefferson Avenue. She paused, making eye contact with each board member. For the past decade, I've continued the quality assurance program I established in 1978, anonymous shopping visits to ensure our founding principles remain intact. Bradley's expression transformed from confidence to uncertainty. Last week, I conducted a standard evaluation of the Westside location, Rose continued. What I experienced was the systematic dismantling of everything Thompson Markets was built upon. She activated the presentation screen, displaying security footage from her encounter with Bradley. The video clearly showed his discriminatory behavior and explicit statements about upgrading clientele. Following this incident, my grandson Marcus and I conducted a thorough investigation revealing a pattern of discrimination targeting elderly black customers, the very community that supported Thompson Markets from its first day of operation. William reviewed the documentation, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Bradley, these allegations appear substantiated by considerable evidence. Your response? Bradley shifted strategies immediately. I had no idea this woman was related to ownership. My actions were based on standard loss prevention protocols, if I'd known her identity. That is precisely the problem, Rose interrupted firmly. Thompson Markets was founded on the principle that every customer deserves identical respect and service regardless of their identity. The fact that you believe preferential treatment should be given based on status or connections violates our most fundamental values. The board members exchanged glances as Rose continued her presentation, methodically outlining the evidence collected from 73 customers across 6 months of documented incidents. The statistical analysis on page 42 demonstrates the correlation between policy enforcement and customer demographics, Rose explained. Note the implementation timing coincides precisely with management transition at affected locations. Sandra Chen studied the data closely. This indicates coordinated action rather than isolated incidents. Bradley, did you receive authorization for these policy modifications? Bradley hesitated momentarily. Regional Director Lawson approved my efficiency protocols. William checked his tablet quickly. Patricia Lawson is waiting outside. Please ask her to join us immediately. When Patricia entered, her expression revealed immediate concern upon seeing Rose. Ms. Lawson, William began, did you authorize these policy changes at the Westside location? Patricia reviewed the documentation briefly. I approved efficiency measures, not discriminatory practices. Bradley characterized these as premium customer initiatives, not exclusionary policies. Yet you received multiple customer complaints, Rose noted, referencing the evidence. 17 formal complaints were submitted through proper channels, all directed to your office. None received responses. Patricia paled slightly. Those were categorized as non-priority feedback by the automated system. An automated system reprogrammed 3 months ago, Marcus added, joining the discussion. The recategorization protocol was implemented 1 week after Bradley's appointment. William's expression hardened. This suggests deliberate evidence suppression. Precisely, Rose confirmed. The investigation reveals systematic policy manipulation, creating artificial barriers for specific customer demographics while concealing evidence of discrimination. For the next hour, Rose and Marcus presented their comprehensive findings. The board members asked clarifying questions, reviewing evidence documentation while Bradley's confident demeanor steadily eroded. The membership program Bradley attempted to implement would have effectively eliminated 73% of current customers, Rose explained. Analysis indicates targeted elimination of primarily elderly black customers while preserving higher-income demographics from surrounding neighborhoods. William turned to Bradley directly. Did you understand that such policies violated our corporate charter? I was focused on profitability metrics, Bradley insisted. Every decision was financially justified. At the expense of our founding principles, Rose countered. Thompson Markets has always balanced profitability with community responsibility. These are not mutually exclusive objectives. As the presentation concluded, William addressed the board. Given the evidence presented, I recommend immediate suspension of the policies in question pending comprehensive review. Bradley Carson and Patricia Lawson will be placed on administrative leave during investigation. Sandra Chen raised her hand. I move that we implement broader corrective measures. This situation reveals systemic vulnerabilities in our oversight mechanisms. Agreed, William nodded. Mother, would you be willing to chair a special committee to evaluate our current practices against founding principles? Rose considered momentarily. I would, with one condition. Our response must focus on systemic correction rather than merely addressing individual actors. Bradley and Patricia implemented flawed practices, but our governance systems failed to detect them. Comprehensive reform requires addressing underlying structures. Bradley attempted one final defense. Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, retail has changed since your day. Modern efficiency requires demographic targeting. Rose turned to him directly. Young man, that perspective fundamentally misunderstands our business model. Thompson Markets succeeded precisely because we served communities overlooked by other retailers. Inclusivity isn't merely ethical, it's strategically sound. The board voted unanimously to implement Rose's recommendations. As the meeting concluded, William approached his mother privately. "You could have simply told me about this situation," he said quietly. "This wasn't about family intervention," Rose explained. "The system needed to function correctly regardless of personal connections. If our oversight mechanisms fail without my direct involvement, we've built an unsustainable model." William nodded slowly, understanding her wisdom. "I've focused on expansion at the expense of operational integrity. That changes today." As Rose gathered her materials, Sandra Chen approached her with respect. "You built something remarkable, Rose. Today you protected it." "Not just me," Rose corrected, gesturing toward the community members waiting outside. "Thompson Markets was always a community achievement. Today simply reminded us of that foundation." As they departed the boardroom, Rose knew their work was just beginning. The incident had revealed deeper systemic vulnerabilities requiring comprehensive reform. The board meeting wasn't an ending, it was the first step toward reclaiming the company's founding vision. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Rose stood at the podium in the Westside Thompson Markets location, addressing the gathered community. The store had undergone significant transformation, restored community bulletin boards, updated signage emphasizing inclusivity, and staff engaging respectfully with every customer. "Today marks not merely a correction but a recommitment to our founding principles," Rose began, surveying the diverse audience. "Thompson Markets exists to serve all community members with equal dignity and respect." The Justice and Reform initiative she developed contained 5 core components, displayed on presentation boards throughout the store. 1. Structural accountability. Independent Oversight Committee, community representatives. Quarterly demographic service analysis. Anonymous customer feedback system. Transparent complaint resolution protocols. 2. Personnel development. Comprehensive anti-bias training program. Performance metrics emphasizing inclusive service. Recruitment emphasizing community representation. Leadership development for diverse team members. 3. Policy reformation. Standardized service requirements across all locations. Elimination of discriminatory efficiency metrics. Renewed focus on community accessibility. Price equity monitoring system implementation. 4. Community restoration. Formal apology to affected customers. Compensation for documented discrimination. Investment in neighborhood development projects. Enhanced senior support services. 5. Systemic prevention. Automated discriminatory pattern detection. Regular independent audit procedures. Protected whistleblower channels. Governance structure realignment. These changes exceed standard corporate responses, Rose explained. They address fundamental structures that allow discrimination to develop undetected. True justice requires systemic transformation, not merely individual consequences. William had embraced the reforms with surprising enthusiasm, implementing them across all 36 locations. Marcus had established a dedicated legal team ensuring compliance with both corporate standards and civil rights requirements. Bradley Carson sat in the front row, his expression thoughtful rather than resentful. Part of Rose's approach had surprised many board members. She'd insisted on rehabilitation rather than termination for involved personnel. "Mr. Carson," Rose acknowledged him directly, "would you share your perspective on the training program?" Bradley stood somewhat hesitantly. "The past month has been educational. I was trained to prioritize profit metrics above all else throughout my career." The comprehensive history Mrs. Thompson provided about how Thompson Markets succeeded precisely by serving overlooked communities challenged my fundamental assumptions. Rose nodded approvingly. Bradley now served as an anti-discrimination compliance officer, his former experience providing valuable insight into how discriminatory practices develop within corporate structures. "Transformation requires both accountability and education," Rose continued. "A response prioritizes system correction over punitive measures alone." Geraldine Wilson approached the microphone during the community feedback section. "Mrs. Thompson, many of us didn't know your connection to the company. Why maintain anonymity all these years?" "Quality assurance requires authentic customer experience," Rose explained. "Privilege changes how we're treated. By remaining anonymous, I could ensure all customers received the service our principals promised." The implementation timeline projected behind Rose showed completed phases alongside upcoming initiatives. The Community Oversight Committee was already operational, with Harold Jenkins serving as inaugural chairperson. "This incident revealed both challenges and strengths," Rose concluded. While our systems temporarily failed, our community's commitment to justice prevailed. Thompson Markets recommits today to serving all customers with equal respect, dignity, and access. As Rose concluded her presentation, William announced the establishment of the Rose Thompson Community Service Award, an annual recognition for employees demonstrating exceptional commitment to inclusive customer service. Later, as community members enjoyed refreshments and discussed the changes, Marcus joined his grandmother by the original store photos displayed near the entrance. Strategic patience vindicated again, he observed. The systematic approach yielded comprehensive reform rather than mere symbolic action. Rose smiled slightly. Justice requires both wisdom and persistence. The true measure of our success will be sustainability, whether these changes endure beyond current leadership. With the structural modifications implemented, they should, Marcus assured her. Perhaps, Rose acknowledged, but eternal vigilance remains necessary. Systems naturally drift toward exclusion without consistent correction. As they watched Bradley explaining the new oversight mechanisms to community members, Rose reflected on the journey. What began as a simple shopping trip had revealed critical vulnerabilities in her life's work, but had also provided the opportunity to strengthen it for generations to come. The Thompson Markets legacy had been reclaimed, not through power assertions or punitive measures, but through the methodical pursuit of systemic justice. For Rose Thompson, that represented the most meaningful victory of all.